I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to have a look at some of the elements of Illustrator that will help you get started if you're a Photoshop user actually using Illustrator. When you first start Illustrator, a lot of the tools and things that are around the screen look reasonably familiar to you, and we're going to build on that familiarity to learn to use Illustrator. I'm going to start by choosing File New so I can create a new document. Now I suggest that if you're coming from Photoshop that you set color mode to RGB unless you have a good reason to do otherwise. I'm using a custom profile here. All I've done is selected the paper size as letter, and I'm going to choose a landscape orientation. And for number of artboards, I'm just going to set that to 1. So let's just select that as being the kind of document that we're going to work with in Illustrator, and if you settle on that for most of your initial work in Illustrator, you won't be disappointed. Now I like my windows to be floating free, so as you would do in Photoshop, I've chosen window and arrange, and I have it set actually for my windows not to be tabbed, but you could choose float all in windows if you wanted to. To square the artboard up inside the window, I'm going to press Control or Command 0, and that just puts me in this position. Now, one of the things that you need to understand about Illustrator is that it works on shapes. It's a vector drawing tool, so we're going to be drawing with vectors. So we're going to start here with the rectangle tool, and underneath it in this flyout menu are a lot of other tools here, such as polygon and star. There is no shape tool per se that you're used to using in Photoshop. For example, there is no custom shape tool, so you're going to need to build up your shapes using the shapes that are available here. But let's click the star, and I can just drag to create a star. I'm just going to delete that, so I'll press the delete button, and let's see another way of creating a star. If I double click, I'll open a star dialog. And a lot of Illustrator's tools work this way. Let's go back here, click the rectangle tool and double click, and what happens is that we open up a rectangle dialog, and that allows us to set the height and width of our rectangle. But we want a star, so let's go back to Star tool, double click to open this dialog. We can set the number of points and then the external and internal radius of our star. So I'm just going to choose those values and just click OK, and that's the kind of star that I get. Now if I want to move or perhaps resize the star, I'm going to click the selection tool and then make sure that I select the star. Now I can move it around the screen, and I can also resize it. If I hold Shift as I do this, it will be constrained to the proportions that it started out being. You can see over here that we have a fill and a stroke color. Fill is on the left and stroke is on the right. It's also available up here. Right now we have a white fill and a black stroke, so our star is filled with white with a black stroke. We can change the fill by clicking on the fill option here. If we double click, we get the standard color picker. But probably what you'll most want to use is the swatches palette. So I'm going to choose Window and then Swatches to bring up the swatches palette. We can select to show all swatches or just color groups, patterns, gradients, or color swatches. For now, I think show all swatches is a better choice. And here we have some colors that we can use. So I'm going to select pink to color my star pink. Now I did this way because it's going to happen to you, because what's happened is I've selected pink for my foreground color, but my star hasn't changed. The reason for that is that the star's not selected. So let's go back with the selection tool, select the star, and now let's choose pink for the foreground color. Now we have a pink star with a black stroke border. If we want to change the border, we'll just select the border so that its little box comes to the front. Now we can select a border color, such as a yellow. Now we have this yellow border color. We can't really see this stroke border very clearly, so let's increase the stroke. I'm just increasing it by clicking here, or I could drop the dialog down and make a selection here. Let's do an 8-point stroke. When I click away, you'll see that we have a yellow stroke around our pink star. Now we can copy elements in Illustrator by selecting them first of all, because you have to select anything before you can do anything with it, and then hold down the Alt or Option key and the cursor changes to a black and a white arrow. That's telling you it's in copy mode. Now that's contrary to how you normally do it in Windows, so you may want to be just aware of that this is the Alt or Option key that I'm pressing. Now I can drag one star away from the other star and I have two stars. I can change the look of this star by clicking on it, and let's give it a blue fill. I can tap here to bring the fill color to the front and then select the blue fill, or I can choose the fill and stroke using these options here. So if I know I want stroke, I can just come to the stroke and then select a stroke color. And now we have two stars. They're the exact same size and they have the exact same amount of border around them, but they're differently colored. Now, like you're used to in Photoshop, these two stars have a relationship with each other, and it's a layered relationship. So I'm just going to target this blue star and drag it over part of the other star. Now the yellow and pink star is behind the red and blue star. We can change its positioning if we want to. We can do that from the Object menu. We would choose Object, Arrange, and then we would choose what we want to happen to the currently selected object, this particular star. If we want it behind this one, we could choose Send to Back. And now it's placed behind that star. You can also do that using the Layers palette. Now layers work a little differently in Illustrator to the way they do in Photoshop, but they're still very valuable tools. We'll choose Window and then Layers to display the Layers palette. And you can see here that I have one layer. It's Layer 1. Let's just resize this so that we can see things a little more clearly. Panel Options, and let's go to a large view. Okay, it's a little bit bigger now. So now I can open up my layer 1, and it has two paths in it, the pink star and the blue star. And this layering works the same in Illustrator as it does in Photoshop, in that this pink star is on top of the blue star because it's in this position in the layer palette. If I drag the blue star and place it above the pink star, then you can see that we've just changed its layering, exactly the same as we did with Object Arrange. So this is another way that you can affect layering in Illustrator. Now in Illustrator you don't have a crop tool. If you have a look here, there is no crop tool. So if you want to crop something, it's important that you know how. Let's just take this star out of the way because I'm going to crop it to a different shape. So I'm going to choose something that I can use to crop it with. Let's say I want to crop it to a circle. This is something that you can do in Illustrator that you can't do in Photoshop. In Photoshop, everything has to be cropped to a rectangle or square. In Illustrator, you can crop to any shape. So I'm going to target here the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw out a circle. So to draw a circle, I'm going to hold the Shift key to constrain the ellipse into a regular shape. And I'm just going to measure out the size circle that I want to use to crop this shape here. Now it would help me if I set this back to the default values of white and black. So I'm just going to press the letter D to set the default values. And in actual fact, if I just used the stroke rather than the fill, that would be better still, because that will allow me now to see my star underneath my cutout, the thing I'm going to use to cut it out with. So we want to make this transparent or no fill at all. To make it no fill, we target the fill tool here and we choose this red slash. Anytime you see a white fill with a red slash through it, that means there's no fill at all. Now it's a little bit clearer for us to see what it is that we would be cropping this star to. So I'm just going to move this circle into position and perhaps size it using the Shift key to constrain it in size. And I'm saying this is what I want to see of my star, just the bit that is inside the circle, and we're going to discard all the rest of it. To do that, I need to select both the shape that I'm using as the clipping path and the shape that I want to cut. So I've got the clipping path here, and now I'm going to shift and click to select the blue and red shape, and I can tell that they're selected because I've got little blue boxes here showing that these are selected. Now you may find that the color of these boxes changes from time to time because it relates to the color of the layer, and you can recolor layers, and you'll find that when you add layers they have different colors. But what you're looking for is actually just a box here and whatever color it happens to be. This is different, of course, to Photoshop, because in Photoshop you would see that these layers would be highlighted if they were selected. That's not the case in Illustrator. You're looking for these colored boxes. So now we have our clipping path and our shape that we want to clip to. The clipping path must be on top, the shape underneath. We'll choose Object and then Clipping Mask and then Make. So now we've clipped the star shape so that it is the shape that we have cut it to. Now that's one of the ways that you can reshape objects, but another way is to use the Pathfinder tool, and that's another of the tools that you'll be using a lot in Illustrator. Let's go and create a circle. So again, I'm just holding the Shift key as I drag it out, and let's select a pink fill for it and no stroke. To apply no stroke, I'm going to click the None, the white background with the red slash through it. So now we have a red shape. Let's just click away from here. We have a red shape that has no stroke on it at all. Now let's go and create a rectangle, and I'm going to make my rectangle the same size as my circle, but this time I'm going to fill it with a different color. Now I can pre-select that by just clicking on the fill color because it's at the front here right now, so I can pre-select that my shape is going to be a blue fill. I'm just going to line it up using these smart guides and just hold the Shift key as I drag across to create a rectangle, actually a square, that fits inside this circle. So these are the same dimensions across. The radius of the circle is the same as one of the sides of this square. Now because I've got two shapes, I can actually have them interact with each other. I'm going to select the two shapes, and let's have a look at the Pathfinder palette. This is one of the tools that you're going to use a lot in Illustrator. We can do various things with the shapes that we've created using this palette. For example, we can click this option and unite them. And what that does is it creates one shape out of the two. So it sort of adds the two together, and it's been given the color of the second shape that we created. I'll click Undo Add. Now we can reselect them, and we can do things such as minus front. So we'll subtract the front shape, the blue shape, from the red one, leaving us just a semicircle. And there's our red semicircle. There are other options here. In fact, there are 10 in total, and they give you various options for breaking up shapes. One of the useful ones is this divide option. So I'm just going to click on Divide, and what that does is it divides these shapes up into little pieces. Right now I can't do anything with them because although they're divided up into little pieces, they're still stuck together. That's another of the slightly frustrating things about Illustrator. We need to unstick them. Let's go to Object and let's go to Ungroup. And now the elements are ungrouped, and you can see that this divide tool has divided this shape up into the 3 composite pieces. And we could use that to do something with it, for example, to start to create a logo. But you can see that the Pathfinder can be very handy in terms of assembling shapes by putting lots of them together to form a union, or cutting them up into little pieces to do something else with them. That's one of the palettes that you'll want to be experimenting quite a bit with until you get familiar with using it. Once you've created a document in Illustrator, whatever that happens to be, you'll want to save it. You'll choose File, Save, as you would in any application. And I'm just going to click to create a name for mine, so I'm going to call it Test 1. And I'm going to save it as an Adobe Illustrator document, and I'll click Save. Now when you click Save in Illustrator, you get this Illustrator Options dialog, and it looks really confusing. The thing to know about this dialog is that for right now you can just ignore it and just click OK, and that will just save your document. Now I can close it, and if I want to reopen it, I can choose File and then Open and go and find it, or File, Open Recent, because it is a recent document, and click it to reopen it. So there's an introduction to Illustrator for Photoshop users. This is the first of a series of videos that I'm going to do on this topic. So if you've enjoyed it, look out for part 2, where I'll go into more tools, tips and techniques to get you started with Illustrator. Thank you for joining me for this YouTube video tutorial. If you've enjoyed the tutorial, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel so you'll be advised when new YouTube videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tutorials on Illustrator as well as other applications including Photoshop and Lightroom.